Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Just going to wait and let everybody get clicked in here. I see some familiar faces. Well, not faces, but I see some names. All right. And we're all here. Hi, my name is Kayla Daly. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and board certified music therapist located in Massachusetts. And I'm here to talk to you today a little bit about some self-care habits. Okay, so, and this is a really great prime time for self-care habits, obviously, because of our concerns about the pandemic, right? So we've been trucking away at this pandemic for almost a year now. And it's pretty easy for us to lose track of our own self-care. We put a lot of things aside when we are dealing with heightened stress. And obviously, we've had a lot of heightened stress over the last year. So welcome. And I'm going to share my screen if that's all right with everybody. And just get to the presentation here. Of course, it's like right under there. There we go. All right. And let's see if I can do it this way. Aha, here we are. All right. And so really the theme of today, okay, is not that we're going to have some magical thing sweep into our lives where we have all these beautiful self-care habits that just instantly take hold and we're just a whole new person, right? That just isn't realistic. It doesn't happen that way. The idea is the cascade effect or a ripple effect, if you will. And so we're going to talk about how to kind of make those tiny little changes that ripple effect in our lives to help us make bigger changes that become easier and easier the more small changes you make. So what do we know? Starting from the beginning, self-care really has a direct impact to our psychosocial well-being as well as our physical well-being. And so when we start to kind of be lax with maintaining positive self-care habits, what we see is direct impacts to our physical health. Our blood pressure might go up. We make poor choices with our eating habits that kind of, again, cascade into almost a negative snowball effect. Stress, depression, anxiety, all of these things kind of take hold when we ignore our self-care. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that that doesn't happen. And so when we talk about this model of health, we're talking about a biopsychosocial model of health. And what we're looking at is that we all have our needs. So, and I also like to include cultural and spiritual in this model of health because those are also aspects of our identities that are really important, important. So our biology, right? So what we were born with, our genetics, our physical health, any medication effects that we might experience, our psychology and our emotional needs, and then our social needs, right? So our peers, our interactions, all of these things come together to form our needs as well as our culture and our spiritual needs. When we look at this model of health, this is really important. We might look at, say, for example, I run every day, my physical health needs are phenomenal, and yet something's missing, right? So, and it might be my mental health. I'm not doing enough self-care with mental health. Or maybe I'm really good with my self-care with my mental health and my social health, but my physical health is the one that's kind of going by the wayside. So it's kind of like this balancing act with all these things that work together to make our a holistic health model, if you will. And this kind of awareness of the biopsychosocial model helps us learn that we have different kinds of needs that we can address with self-care. Okay, so our self-care can be a biological need, it can be a physical, a psychological need, or a social emotional need. Cultural need, maybe we need to connect deeper to our culture, or a spiritual need. All right, and so, sorry, I'm trying to kind of make this smaller. There we go. Okay, and so the biopsychosocial model of health is very much a part of the salutogenic model of health as well. So compared to the medical model or a pathogenic model of health, where we're looking at a symptom or we're treating just a symptom, we're avoiding a problem, it's reactive. So something happens and we react to it. And it also assumes that we're all inherently healthy. It's an ideal model of health. It's not really work. A salutogenic model of health looks at the potential of us as human beings. As human beings, we all have various needs. We all have individual needs. It's proactive, so it believes in preventative medicine. A really good way to look at this, right, is when I work with my oncology patients in the cancer center, the medical model is trying to treat the cancer, and sometimes that medical model can be really damaging to the other aspects of health. So maybe our spiritual health is really, we can't go to church because the chemo is really wreaking havoc. And that's really actually making me feel so much worse. If I could get there somehow, or access my church through Zoom, I'd feel better. If I had more ability to be social and I wasn't so tired from chemo. So while the chemo is treating the cancer, it's also wreaking havoc on the other areas of the biopsychosocial model of health. Salutogenesis really kind of looks at the relationship between stress and wellness. And really wants to have that proactive relationship so that we take all of these things into consideration, and we work together with medical model to really kind of provide a more realistic method of care. And so when you're, again, bringing it back to self-care habits, it's kind of giving ourselves permission to look at these things that kind of get pushed by the wayside, because in America, we're going. Oh, if you're not working, something's wrong. If you're not slaving away at this job, something's wrong. If you put aside time for yourself, that's seen as lazy. If you get an extra day where you can sleep in, that's seen as lazy. And it's really not benefiting our health in the long run. And so implementing balanced models of self-care is going to really impact us in a much better way for the long run, for our long-term health goals, but also for our short-term health goals. So we're getting to we're going to do an exercise in self-care with a relaxation exercise that I have for you with some music. So we're getting to that. But what we're going to talk a little bit about is what we can learn from our emotional needs. Again, in the salutogenic model of health, emotions that come up, right? Depression, anxiety, all these things. You can also look at them as little messengers. They're coming to tell us that we have a need that is unmet. Right? So our emotional needs are telling us that we have a need that is unmet. And what do we need to learn from that need? So for example, when I'm feeling depressed, maybe I need a little bit more social support. And self-care around that would be scheduling regular meetups with my friends so that I don't feel so isolated anymore. So we're learning about what kind of conversation we can have, essentially, or a dialogue, if you will, with our emotional needs. What are they trying to tell us? What can we learn about ourselves from kind of examining them instead of kind of squashing them down and saying they're not a real problem? Okay. And so, like I said in the tips section here, the act of gently noticing our feelings, right? We allow ourselves to feel through them and learn from them as opposed to squash them down. Okay. And finally, one of the most I find beneficial exercises that I like to do with my clients is, how would you speak to your younger self in the situation? If you're talking to a child and trying to help them feel better about maybe taking care of themselves, we certainly wouldn't talk to that child the way that we typically talk to ourselves. Our internal dialogue tends to be pretty harsh. And so if we're trying to change that, how we speak with ourselves, imagine that you're talking to your younger self. How would you show self-compassion? How would you help them build those little habits that we're trying to initiate, those small changes to make bigger changes? Okay. All right, so let's get to it. If you can find a comfortable spot wherever you are, I know if you're at home, that might be a little bit easier. If you are in an office, that might be tricky, but try to find a comfortable spot. If that means your feet are firmly planted, or maybe you want to adjust your seat, please take time to do that. And if you feel the need to close your eyes, that's also okay. If not, you can just find something peaceful to look at. Maybe I have a plant over in the corner of my room that I want to look at when I'm doing this. And this is essentially a guided relaxation exercise for self-care. There is no wrong way to do this. Excuse me, there's no right way to do this. I'm also a new mom, so forgive me if I seem tired. So if I mess up my words, that's why. I apologize. I have a new baby. But so there are various ways to engage in this. So there's no perfect way. The way that Sally does it isn't going to be the way that Michael does it, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to make this your own. And the best way to do it is however you feel is most comfortable for you. Okay. And so we're just going to take a minute. So take a minute to just notice your breathing. And it might be a little fast, it might be pressured, that's okay. You might be breathing solely through your mouth. Typically, when I ask people to notice their breath, it gets a little tense. So we're just going to take some deep breaths together. And it doesn't matter, again, if it goes with the music or not. You do this how it fits with you, okay? So I'm going to give you a directive, but you breathe in your own time. So breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, and breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Again, in your own pace, we're going to do it one more time. So breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and Good. So just notice your breath. Again, whatever your pace is more than fine for today. It's enough. And as you breathe, I'm going to ask you to just imagine a person standing in front of you. And this person in front of you is here to kind of give you a little bit of a message. So this person embodies, sorry, I'm going to check the chat really quick because it's blinking. Let me see if I can open it. No, I don't know how to open it. Oh, there it is. I see it. Okay, sorry, we're experiencing something. Let me see. Oh, the sound just became much more muted and you can barely hear. Okay, I can fix that. Oops. Stop share. Let's do this. Okay. Does it sound better if I do this? Can everybody hear? Let me see. I'm just checking. Not better yet. Oh, so strange. Okay, let me see if I can move it quickly. I am trying to work on it. If it's a little closer, is that better? Oh, somebody said they can hear. Okay. Oh, good. Okay, great. All right, so let's try this again. I'm going to share the screen again. I turned a setting on a little bit differently, so hopefully that'll help us. Some folks are still having some challenges, some folks are not. Hopefully this is a little bit better. Okay, so let's keep trying. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to go back and start from the beginning of the relaxation. It'll just take a minute, and then we can move forward with the exercise, okay? So breathe in, breathe out, breathe in and out, breathe in, oh, and out. want you to imagine a person sitting in front of you, like you're sitting down for a cup of coffee with a friend, right? If coffee's not your thing, it can be tea or water. And this person in front of you is your needs, your emotional needs, okay? Embodied in a person. And they're here to tell you a little something. So you're going to sit down and have a chat and just listen to what they may have to say to you, all right? Your emotional needs have all these things that they need, right? So they're going to sit and talk with you and just tell you what they may need. So maybe it's been stress. You have a ton of stress in your upper body and you're holding it in your shoulders. So you just take a deep breath in and release your shoulders down. Maybe the person tells you that you haven't been sleeping very well lately. Maybe they tell you that you need a little more social connection. We've all been a little bit isolated, not a little bit, a lot, right? So scheduling regular visits with some friends on Zoom or socially distanced outdoor activities, maybe that's what you need. Just listen to what this person has to say. I'm going to give you a minute to talk with this person. And then when we're through, I'm going to ask you to write down some of the things that they might have said to you, okay? Ask you to gently bring your attention back to this virtual space with me and just take a minute and write down what some of your emotional needs, that little conversation that you had with that person, hopefully, is telling you. And when you're done writing down those few thoughts, we're going to move through it together, and I'm going to give you a couple of ways that you can take these thoughts and put them into a little bit of action. All right. So, let's see. Here we go. So, when we're taking stock, if you will, of what our needs are, our emotional needs, to inform habits of self-care, we're looking at the word discipline almost as a positive word. So typically we kind of associate discipline with a negative sense, but this is really a gentle, soft commitment to continuing to engage as a lifelong learner. Your needs are always going to change, right? Our biological need, our emotional need, our social need. These are all ongoing things. We're humans. We're always growing and changing. And so what we really want to do is pay attention to those changes and kind of welcome them, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I have to create a new routine, or oh my gosh, this is different now. And while we are allowed to grieve changes, really, we're just making a gentle commitment to coming back to this. It's a mindfulness thing. We're committed to establishing these self-care habits in small ways to grow them into bigger ways. And so one of the little tips and tricks that I've actually recently tried myself is trying to set limits on social media or news for a day or two. And then just write down any like subtle changes you may notice in your habits or your mood. So maybe the global events and the pandemic have been really stressing you out. This is a good way to kind of set a limit. This is a self-care habit. Okay. It's so slight and so small, and yet maybe you notice, oh my goodness, I feel so different. One of the things that I noticed is that I opened my phone and would constantly be going to that social media outlet over and over again, even though it's no longer installed on my phone. So it was revealing to me a habit that I had. Okay. And a habit that I really wasn't benefiting from. I was just kind of doom scrolling, if you will. And so this is just one little example, and I'm going to give you a couple more examples, and then we'll get to some time for some questions and answers. And just want to make sure. There we go. Okay. So um, so self-care resource lists are really helpful because sometimes we forget about all of the resources that we have. So this is something that I've recently been doing for a lot of my clients as a therapist, because when we get overrun with stress, we forget about certain things, and that's just kind of what we do when we're stressed and nervous or anxious, etc. And each list is going to look different for each individual person because we all have our own individual needs. So the what of this is maybe routines that are helpful, especially because we're working from home. I know none of you do this, but I know that I got in the habit in the beginning of the pandemic of just being like, it's fine. Nobody can really see if my hair is all that clean. Right. One of the routines that I established was getting up and no matter what, getting in the shower, especially as a new mom. They're like, get in the shower because you feel like a new human. Right. And so that's a routine that no matter what, I wake up, I shower, even if I'm not leaving the house that day, because it was something that really helped me get self-started. Okay. As soon as I showered, I felt like, oh, I've already accomplished something today. It's the same thing people say about the habit of making your own bed. You know, it's something so small, and yet it cascades into feeling like you've accomplished something early on in the morning, um, to then build more habits off of that. So I know I've mentioned scheduled Zoom visits, things like that. Establishing maybe you want to try personal therapy. I'm obviously a little bit biased because as a therapist, I think it's helpful, but a lot of people benefit from having someone to connect with and talk to, especially when we're isolated right now. And most therapists are offering telehealth and remote services during this time. Helpful websites. So there's a lot of mindfulness websites or self-help websites that might be beneficial, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then socially distanced outings, right? So I know that recently, I met up with a couple moms, and we were all 6 feet apart with our baby carriages in the city common area that we met at, and just to have coffee and say hi, just to kind of chat about what are some of the challenges that we've all been experiencing as new moms. So that's a good example. And then the who with a self-care resource list, so research shows that communities that have people that work together, even if they're socially distanced, tend to fend better when things get stressful. And so self-care can also be that social connection, where we kind of have a community, a communal basis. So, for example, there are a lot of Facebook groups where communities have message boards and online events and resources, that are really, really helpful. And so you can search for those resources, whether it be on social media or elsewhere. Sometimes there's meetups and different things like that. But family, friends, colleagues, and neighbors. Okay. So I also highly recommend journal keeping. It can be in a computer or it can be a physical one. I personally like to keep a physical journal. But a resource journal entry might look like, you have your routines, you have your lists of resource websites that you like I have here. And then your goal for the week, maybe it's scheduling a Zoom get together with my friend or a family member one time a week, just to have that social community connection. Okay. Maybe it's a recipe share, maybe it's a book club, etc. Um, I gave you an example of a routine, making lunch the night before, because that feels like, oh, good, I set myself up for success the next day. A tiny habit that can be a big thing. If you're like me, I hate meal prepping. So that's actually a really big deal. If I manage to get something made for the night before, the next morning I feel really positive about that. And I try to make it a meal that I look forward to, so it's not something that's totally only kale. It's something that's got like kale and some sweet potatoes because I like sweet potatoes. or set out some clothes. Again, anything you can do to make that morning a little bit easier is a great self-care habit. Okay. I know these are simple things. Sometimes they seem really, really impossible. So if even this feels like a lot for you, the other thing that I really recommend is, like, if you've taken a sip of water in the morning, give yourself a pat on the back. Super perfect way to self-start. Oh, you know what? I've hydrated a little bit. Really great. Maybe it'll give me incentive to continue to remember to keep that sip of water and congratulate myself on being hydrated. And that's just the one goal for that week, is that I'm going to stay hydrated. And that might be it. Okay. But then you find after a couple of weeks of staying hydrated that you want to build on that. You know what? I'm going to take a walk at lunch, even if it's only 5 minutes. It's something that I didn't do yesterday, and I feel really good about doing it today. And before you know it, 5 minutes might turn into 10. Okay. These 3 websites that I've listed before we get to questions, calm.com, headspace.com, and mindful.org. Calm.com and headspace.com are pretty popular mindfulness websites that help you with breathing and finding a way to essentially guide your mind to not ruminate. Ruminating meaning you're obsessing about something, or you're worrying about something, you're going down that rabbit hole, if you will. It really helps. Headspace particularly helps with your breath, resonant breathing practice and exercise. And calm.com is more of a mindful storytelling, and looking at essentially kind of walking you through a meditative exercise, but you're listening to someone's voice as opposed to just a visual cue, or there's various options that you have through both of them. They're both free, unless you pay for the additional, obviously the additional subscription. And mindful.org is free, and I love it because actually it's got tons and tons of resources. They have articles, blogs, videos. So if you're into mindfulness, or you're just beginning to kind of learn a little bit about it, that's a really great place to start, because there's so much there. And they update it to be relevant to what's going on now, which I find really particularly helpful, excuse me, because, you know, our needs right now are so different than they've ever been before. And I think that that's really important when looking for therapeutic techniques and things that might help you at home when you're kind of fashioning your self-care habits. You really want something that's relevant to what's happening right now. Okay. And so now we have time for about 15 minutes for about any questions. I know I kind of blew through a lot of that. I hope that the exercise was helpful. Let me open this so I can see the chat. I'll stop share for a minute. Are there any questions or comments? You can ask them in the chat. Feel free. I also think my sound is on if anybody unmutes. We have plenty of time, so the questions can be about really anything related to self-care habits as it pertains to what we're talking about today. I just want to make sure we do have it open. Okay. It doesn't look like we have too many questions. And that's okay. I can share my screen one last time then. If you'd like more information about what I do. So as I said, this is our website over here, westtherapy.com. And this is my email. If you have any private questions you want to ask me, that's fine too. You can email me. Or comments on how to make it better. Obviously, we troubleshooted a little bit of sound issue there, but I obviously would be more than open to some feedback about the presentation. Our website here for the clinic that I own is here, westtherapy.com. And the clinic offers music therapy, art therapy, counseling, and dance movement therapy. So if you are interested in any information about that, that is there. And I can also put it in the chat if that's helpful. And if there's no questions, I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you for coming, and I hope that you all, sorry, it's so loud. I hope that you all have a really beautiful afternoon. All right. All right. Thank you so much for your time today. And thanks for listening. And I hope this was helpful. Bye, everybody.